Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of Sikorski's Thinkabouts. And Laura Sikorski, she's a recognized call center makeover expert in operations and technology. She's worked with hospitals, utilities, automobile manufacturers, rental companies, and numerous other industries across the nation. The call center policies, procedures, technology improvements, training programs, and implementation plans developed by Laura have improved operational excellence in all centers that she's worked with. They've enabled staff to proactively anticipate customer needs to resolve all issues through consistency and product knowledge and ensure employees are consistently meeting and or exceeding customer expectations and satisfaction. Her guest today is Frank Tersigni. He's an executive vice president and chief customer officer of Altivon. He's been with Altivon since 2009, involved with contact center and communications technology since 1978. He has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of Toronto and an MBA from Western University Ivy School of Business. He provides senior executives focus on Altivon's customer relationships and ensures that customers' needs are met, investments leveraged, and solutions continue to align with the evolving customer experience strategy. Frank's executive oversight begins the moment a new customer relationship is forged and continues throughout the life of the relationship. And here is Laura Sikorski.
Well, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it. Great information on Frank, our guest today. And good morning, Frank, and thank you so much for being on our show. Our show started about 3 or 4 years ago, and my guests and I share our operations and technology expertise to help you provide outstanding customer service and customer experience. Frank and I go back probably about 6 years when we first met, and we've stayed in touch ever since. So our topic today is, we talk about it a lot, and that's customer effort. Customer effort appears to be right up there with Net Promoter Score and CSAT or customer satisfaction. And Frank and I were talking about, what should we really discuss this morning about customer effort? And he came up with a great title, Solving the Customer Effort Challenge. Is it overdue? Or is it overdue? It's time. So thanks again, Frank, for joining us this morning. And why don't we start off with the first question? Why do you think customer effort is such a critical area in the contact center arena today?
Good morning, Laura. Thank you. It's great to talk to you again. In terms of your question, I think that it's clear based on my experience, there's two fundamental areas that I want to talk about. One is that there was a survey done by the Corporate Executive Board about 4 or 5 years ago now. Its results were published in a book called The Effortless Experience by Matt Dixon. And it simply laid out that the single greatest impact on loyalty and long-term profitability from a customer relationship is based on effort. I spent lots of time in my public speaking over the years talking about customer experience, and it used to be a regular conversation about the moments of wow, the Zappos moments, the Four Seasons moments, where people went above and beyond and created moments of delight for customers. And I found that members of the audience would sometimes look at in somewhat bewilderment at their ability to go back to their organizations and be able to deliver that. And it was only with the releases of this information that I get comfortable in realizing that there's actually a very simple and achievable way to increase loyalty, and that's by reducing customer effort. So it's time. I think, and speaking to people, for whatever reason, here we are 4 years after the book was published, many organizations are still not focused on effort as a single key ingredient to their success in terms of loyalty. And so I'm here to kind of beat that drum a little bit more because I think it's really important.
Well, I appreciate that. Sometimes I'm sure we both experience the same thing. When you go to look for an answer on a company's website, it is so difficult to find what you're doing or what you want. Or if you're calling a technical site and you want a quick answer to a problem, they don't let you type. They have a chatbot asking you, is it about this? Is it about this? Is it about this? And it's almost like I'm trying to get people not to use the IVR too much. If they have this number, a vanity number that forces them to do all the presses, and then how many times you talk to a customer and they say, oh, I just hate calling that customer. I just press 0 pound 1. I just want to speak to a representative. So I think that's kind of telling for all of us out there that customer effort, people want quick answers. They want, they want something in 5, 10, 15 minutes. They don't want to search and so forth. So with that, let's kind of talk a little bit more about the challenges in customer effort, but how you have found success in
Yeah, so let's
reducing
talk
that.
about the challenges a bit. One of the things I think that is, and it might be supplier and technology driven, and we may be at fault to a degree, or in this, where we are inundating the customers with technology. We give them so many different choices in terms of how to work with a particular vendor. If I want to deal with my bank, I can go on the website, I can call them, I can do IVR, I can do my mobile app, I can chat with them, I can do all sorts of different things in terms of dealing with the bank. Go to the kiosk, go to the actual teller in the branch. And what's happening is what we're seeing is what we'll call channel fatigue, in that there's so many different channels to choose from that consumers out there are quite frankly confused as to which is the best channel to deal with for a particular issue or item. And so one of the things, and so that leads to frustration. It certainly leads to greater effort instead of reduced effort, which was the intent in adding all those new channels. So what we're seeing as one of the quick ways to success is to actually introduce the concept of channel guidance. And the best place for that is on people's websites, where people typically go anyway. And it says, if you're dealing with this sort of issue, the best way to talk to us could be chat, it could be come into the branch, it could be, send us an email, or it could be, speak live to an agent, whatever the case may be, and try to provide some guidance for clients and also reduce the number of channels being offered. Figure out use the 80-20 rule, figure out which channels are most appropriate for the particular consumer, for that particular organization, and then use that as the guidance to reduce the difficulty and the complexity of trying to do business with somebody.
That's such an excellent idea, folks out there. Take a look. Everybody's saying omnichannel, multi-channel, and you don't have to have everything. You have to have what your client, your customers want. Kind of maybe go out and say, how would you like to communicate with us? And then, as Frank is saying, put something on the website and offer guidance on where you can get the answer as quickly as you want it. I think that, I love that word, the two words, channel guidance. I'm going to use that now. And when I talk to my clients,
Sounds good. Let's
I
do that.
really appreciate that. What are other ways that you feel customer effort can be reduced?
So let's look at that. I think it really starts with looking at a particular situation, because there's no general answer to that question, but it's very specific to a customer. And it starts with taking a look at what the customer experience looks like today. So the first step is to do some customer journey tracking and journey mapping, so that then you can do what we call journey orchestration, which is actually moving them into the channels that they want to move to, or the journey they should move to. So it starts with the customer. So the answer to your question is it depends. There's some common general things that I'll talk about, I'm sure, as we discuss this morning, Laura. But I think the first step in reducing customer effort is to see what the effort looks like. It sounds silly, but it is uncanny when I stand up in front of a group of chief customer officers or chief experience officers, chief marketing officers or contact center leaders, and you ask the question, how many people have actually done a study as to what the effort looks like for your customers across the different types of transactions? And very rarely do hands go up. So we're working in the dark, and it's really hard to reduce somebody's effort when you don't know what it looks like.
That's so true. And I find a lot of companies, they don't know what about customer mapping, and they look at it when they show me something. Oh, here, this is our customer map, but it's from their perspective.
Right.
It's not from the customer's perspective. And I think that is an important observation from both of us, that when you decide to do customer mapping, make sure it's from your customer's perspective. And why not try a focus group? A lot of times people forget that, hey, you can ask your customers what they want, what they feel comfortable with. Do you think that our industry, and that's the technical side of our industry, has just gone crazy with all the new stuff that's out there? I mean, I myself, I'm not heavy into technology any longer, but my goodness, to be a technologist today, you have to stay so on top of everything and make sure, otherwise you're going to be lost in the weeds.
Right. No, that's really true, Laura. I mean, I feel really badly for the customers out there, the organizational individuals who are responsible for making, decisions and introducing applications that use all these various, types of technology. It's really hard. I mean, the degree of complexity and the rate of change in terms of new technologies become available with AI and bots and on and on and on. It is really difficult for organizations to move. It can be paralyzing. I've seen that. The contact center industry, as we know, I won't speak for you, but I'm old enough to remember the good old days when it was just calls and it was mostly inbound. And the things you worried about were, peaks and valleys and trying to make sure you had enough people to answer the calls when the peaks went up, and not too many people around when the peaks went down, when the valleys existed, right?
Exactly.
That was the challenge. Now it's so complex, and no one, there's no organizational knowledge. No one in an organization can sit there and say, well, this is the way we've been doing it for the last 5 years or 10 years, because these things haven't been done ever before.
Right.
So I feel badly for the folks that are doing this as part of their job, never mind a full-time job like it is for you and I.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I know that was speaking with a client recently, and there were all these presses, and I said, but they all go to the same place. You have
Right.
universal agents. You don't need to force the customer to press 1, press 2. And they were like, oh, that's a really good observation. But
Right.
again, because people just, there's changes in management and so forth, and they just don't take a look at the customer experience and how they are reaching you. Well,
Right.
believe it or not, we're at our halfway point,
Wow.
and that time did go very quickly. I'm going to turn it back over to Eric, who is the producer of our show, and he has some further information.
Altivon is headquartered in Arizona, and for over 25 years, they have built and supported some of the largest, most complex contact center solutions in North America. They deliver high-value, high-impact contact center solutions that enhance contact center operations, elevate the customer experience, and evolve as customer and center needs change. Altivon focuses exclusively on the design, implementation, support, and evolution of contact center solutions. Their deployments range from small cloud-based systems to multi-location implementations for thousands of agents. Based upon market-leading software from Genesis Interactive Intelligence, Altivon offers complete platform replacements along with individual solutions for IVR, outbound dialer, speech it's Monday, speech analytics, workforce management, system testing, and predictive behavioral routing. So why should you work with Altivon? Well, they work with you until they truly understand your needs. They listen, then they act by applying the right technologies and best practices to suit you. Altivon focuses entirely on optimizing the experience that you provide to your customers through the contact center. In their view, nothing is more critical, visible, or complex as your customer-facing solutions. They know that change is hard, and Altivon follows change management principles during all implementations. They work with you to ensure that everyone is on board and your cutover is smooth. Altivon understands digital transformation and its potential for better customer experience, patient experience, and member experience. Their intention is to evolve your solutions as your customer experience strategies and requirements evolve. Altivon has earned a reputation as being a best-of-breed systems integrator and value-added services company in the contact center industry. To reach them, give a call 866-982-5848. That's 866-982-5848. Or email them at info@altivon, that's ALTIVON.com. Or you can check out their website at www.altivon.com. That's www.altivon.com. Laura is offering a free 1-hour telephone consulting session to all WLINY.com listeners. You can take her up on this fabulous offer to discuss an operations or technology issue that you may be experiencing in your call center. You can send Laura an email at Sikorski, that's SIKORSKI, at laurasikorsky.com, or you can give her a call at 631-624-6650. That's 631-624-6650 to set up your appointment today. And now back to Laura Sikorski.
Thank you, Eric. And I just want to say that Altivon and Frank Tersigni are sponsors of our show today. And for that, I want to thank them very much for doing that. It's greatly appreciated. So
You're
let's
welcome.
kind of go back now to, okay, our listeners out there are saying, wow, I have to really take a look at my customer effort. So how do they begin?
Good question. Begin with the customer in terms of, and we've talked about that. I think we may have beaten that one down. So obviously you need to understand what your customer's effort looks like, and from a customer mapping, more importantly, a tracking perspective, which is what the customers actually experience. So let's assume that's done. What are some of the kind of the obvious places? The first one I would look at if I was suddenly cast as a member of an organization making decisions for that company on what to do first, I would look at self-service. If you look at the kind of we as a community, we as individuals are more than comfortable with self-service. We all individually prefer it. Quite frankly, I think we've reached that tipping point, regardless of age, where we prefer to go to an ATM, we prefer to go on the web, we prefer to order through Amazon or whoever our e-commerce favorite supplier is. And so we've reached the point where we prefer self-service. So our consumers feel the same way. And many organizations have self-service, so they're saying, well, Frank, we've already got our IVR and we already have speech enablement. I think it's time to look at it again and look to see what you can do to enhance it. Many of these IVR self-service systems have been around for 5, 6, sometimes longer, 10 years, that haven't been evolved. And so you need to go back and take a look at those and see if you're doing things that can now be facilitated through technology. So the use of AI and the use of better speech recognition, where you can now do some open-ended capabilities with speech, I think introduces a capability within self-service that is far more appropriate and certainly acceptable for the consumers than it ever has been. So that'd be the first place I'd start, Laura.
Okay, perfect. And I totally agree. Going back, thinking like a customer and looking at self-service. People forget that, sometimes we can go in and do something very quickly. It all depends on the services and the products
Right,
that you provide.
right.
So let's talk a little bit about how Altivon does this in terms of helping their customers and supporting what your customers and eventually their customers need.
Yeah, so I think it starts at kind of it's a two-level response. One is strategically, we need to understand what the objectives are. We would insist as best we can at being an outside partner
Hmm.
to our customers, where we're exposed to their customer strategy, where we understand what's important to them and what they're trying to achieve from a competitive differentiation perspective over the next year, 2 or 3, and how they believe their customer experience needs to make them different or make their product or service more appropriate for their consumers, and how they intend to increase their loyalty. We then can apply our experience and our understanding of things like effort and other things to kind of help them, perhaps give them some guidance or some input into their strategy. And then it turns into the tactical piece, where how does that manifest itself into the day-to-day operations of typically the contact center, where we will go in and do, we'll sit with agents, we'll understand the side, do side by sides, we'll understand the needs of those organizations and look at kind of the low-hanging fruit, things like self-service, things like Omnichannel, which is a topical thing today, and deserves probably its own half hour.
Hmm.
But it requires a significant amount of effort to get that done. Effort from the organizational side, because it's hard. Omnichannel is, and some other things like that, proactive outbound. And lastly, let's not forget about the agent. Too often times we'll focus externally, where the most important person in this equation of dealing with the customer is the agent or the customer
Hmm.
service representative, call them what you will. And they need to have some attention. They need some tools, and we'll look at those as well.
That's totally spot on, because a lot of times people forget that the greatest company asset is their employees, and
Right.
many times they are the only voice to the customer.
Right.
And so empowering, making them feel comfortable in their work environment is extremely important. I know we talked a little bit about self-service earlier, and you brought that up. Um, I I agree to a certain degree about self-service, but are companies making it too complicated?
Right.
Or I guess maybe the question is, we talk about speech recognition, we talk about speech analytics. Do the customers, do you think, really like it?
Good question. I think certain transactions, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we can all speak to experiences where it's been quick, it's been easy, the system recognizes what you're trying to do, and you get your job done, and it's a low effort experience, and away you go. You're happy. Where it gets problematic is when there's confusion, right? When it's not understanding what you need to do or want to do, and that's where an analysis of where people are having issues with the self-service environment, and to take those out, to simplify it, to use the 80/20, or maybe even a more stringent rule where you're only going to try to automate 30-40% of it instead of 80 or 90. And just deal with the very, very simple things in a bot or in an AI-enabled self-service environment, and get the rest to an agent. And make sure when you get that to an agent that they've got the information they need to then be able to solve the customer's problems or issues or
No,
questions.
I totally agree. How do you, in your journeys with your customers, how do you think they feel about the bot, the chat bot, the interaction with a computer? Because sometimes I think I know I'm dealing with a chat bot, and
Right.
then sometimes, I get, it's amazing that I'm talking to a robot and they
Right.
actually sound real.
Right. Yeah, it's the jury's still out, I think.
Uh-huh.
It's early days. I mean, if you think about it, we've probably only been doing this for less than 2 years, maybe a year,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is relatively new technology. So we're cutting our teeth on some of the experiences. I think, some best practices are beginning to emerge. Number one, you need to let the consumer know that they're dealing with a bot of some sort, whether it be a simple web chat, a chat bot where you're simply doing it from a text basis where there's interaction, or based on speech. And I think that as long as people know, then there's a willingness to at least there's an expectation of what the behavior will be like. So that's important from our experience. But generally, I think that it's going well, but it's got to be limited to a small. Our experience, our view is that you can't try to make it too broad. You've got to find one transaction, one at a time. Find one transaction where a bot is appropriate for one use case. Let's put it that way. Apply it, learn it, get it working really well, and then move on to the next, as opposed to trying to apply it across the board where it won't do any of them really well, like anything else, right?
Well, and if you don't do a proof of concept,
Right.
that and sometimes people forget, let's try something out first. Don't just
Right.
go full blown and make changes to your phone tree or
Right.
how you want to deal with customers. And I was recently a client, and they said, well, let's do this right now, and let's do this in 2 weeks. And I said, let's look at holistically. We have to look at the customer first, and we don't want to make it so
Right.
confusing that this week we're telling them one thing and then 2 weeks later we're telling them another. So,
Right.
words of caution, folks, if you're going to try and look at customer effort, get your customers involved and do it slowly. There's nothing out there that says you have to push a time clock and you have to get it done right away. The important thing is to get it done right.
Right.
So,
Agreed.
what warnings or pitfalls do you want to share with our listeners this morning?
Sure. I think we've talked about a few. We've alluded to several of them. One is trying
Mhm.
to do too much too quickly, and you just talked about that with your own experience, Laura. So that's one. So avoid that. Secondly, is take an outside-in approach first, which is to talk to the customer. So that the pitfall we've seen is getting enamored with technology, being convinced by the vendors out there, and we try not to be one of those, where you get the shiny object syndrome, where people want to implement this technology because it's so cool,
Right.
forgetting the impact of the customers. And we've seen some, not thankfully with us, but some not great stories or experiences out there, some disasters, if you will. So those are two obvious ones. The other one is to not get too enamored with this whole cloud thing. And cloud is incredibly important. It is an enabler for many organizations out there who want to move quickly or have certain requirements, but it is not the be all and end all. I mean, I think one of the mistakes people make is assume because they're going with a cloud solution that it's going to solve all their problems. There's no fundamental difference from the application perspective, the software that's being deployed, that what you can do with it, whether it's cloud or premise. It's just where the system lives, right?
Right.
So I think one of the pitfalls I would encourage people to avoid is make a decision based on the application needs and what you require, and then figure out whether you want to deploy it in the cloud or on your premise, because those are really disconnected situations. So those are three off the top of my head, Laura. Hopefully that gives
Yeah,
you
no, that's
some
great.
idea.
Now, do you think on cloud,
Yep.
I've always looked at cloud as, do you want it an operational expense or do you want an amortization type of expense?
Right.
And what's your like your opinion on cloud? I mean, I've always heard, and some of my clients have cloud, and they like it because they don't have to worry about releases.
Right.
Once it's up there in the cloud, they
Right.
get the latest and greatest.
Right. Yeah,
So
so it's interesting. I mean, that's just talk about releases. In the old days when releases required physical changes of servers and the
right,
old forklift upgrade, it was a big deal. These days, even for our premise customers, an update is an update. It's not a big deal. You get the software sent, you do some testing, and away you go. It's not as difficult as it used to be. But it requires effort. So certainly for organizations who don't have a lot of IT folks, not having to worry about that is important. So that is absolutely a check mark on the side of cloud. The operational expense piece is important to note. There's vendors out there like Genesys, who we're familiar with, who are introducing, if you will, operational-based software pricing, but on a premise-based solution. So you have it on your site. You get to customize it the way you want. You get to have it in a private, really secure environment. You control it. It's just you. And you're paying for it on a per month per agent basis, and you have the ability to flex with peaks and
right.
mix and match software. It's very cool. So it's just required some financial creativity, and you have the benefits of cloud on an on-premise solution. The point is, figure out what you need, and then let the vendors figure out what the best solution is for you, as opposed to just thinking you need something and then kind of being stuck in that paradigm.
Just one more question,
Sure.
and it wasn't even on our list to talk about, and that's remote workers.
Yep.
Yesterday I had to make a change in a reservation at Hilton Hotels, and I finally realized that they had gone all remote
Right.
several years ago. And how do you find customers reacting to remote agents at home? What's all involved in that?
Yeah, so I think if you're talking about the organizations themselves, there's a growing tendency to recognize that that's a great asset. And given technology, whether it be cloud or premise, doesn't matter. A remote agent is no different in terms of technology and their capabilities than somebody who's sitting on a floor with 100 or 1,000 other people.
And so seatmates,
They
right?
can be supervised, they can be recorded, all the things, right? So I think that what the benefit is, though, is that they get to hire the best talent no matter where they live. If you've got a star agent who is going off on mat leave or pat leave or whatever the case may be, and they want to work from home, they can do that. If they want to work 4 hours a day, you can have them working from home and still being part of your talent pool. So you've invested heavily in somebody who's been with you 10 years. They want to work from home part of the time, or their circumstances change. Why not keep them? So there's absolutely no reason why that can't be a significant part of the strategy for the workforce. We as an organization are 100% home-based. We decided we closed our last bricks and mortar office in Toronto, as it turned out, about a year ago. And we just work wherever people live, and we hire the best talent no matter where they live in North America. And we say our customer's office is our office. When we need to be on site, we're on site, and that's where we meet.
And that's where it is.
We think it's great.
Well, you know what? This has been an excellent show. Frank, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. And for anyone out there, if you'd like to be a guest on our show, do not hesitate to call me. My cell is 631-624-6650. And thank you for listening and clicking in. And one more thing, I just want to thank Eric, our producer, who we lovingly call the king of internet radio, for a great job today and making us all look so great. And, WLINY.com, internet radio, we're live on Mondays. So, folks, thank you again and look forward to next week.
Thank you.